Yo, what up? It's Tank Lip. The camera chopped me off. What's new? Some things never change. So, I had just watched the first clip of this blog to see where the camera, chopped off and shit. So I can now continue with like some coherence to the story. So, video one, or part one of this blog, leads up to I'm calling the Oviedo police. And so basically, keep in mind, Panera has no idea that I'm in my car calling the police because there was no altercation or problem either brought on to Tank Lip or brought on by Tank Lip in Panera. Again, I just processed the information that I'm observing before I went in Panera, got my coffee, and then went back to my car, sat in my car, and observed this guy doing the same thing, this aggressive demeanor towards me. It was blatant to the point where you begin to wonder, was this guy baiting me to be like for me to be a reactive individual, get out, maybe have an altercation with him where the Panera staff that doesn't like a setup, like classic traditional, like storybook, textbook, like Tank Lip's getting framed or set up, instigate a situation where based on what they think is my personality, I'm going to have an altercation with this guy based on his blatant, demeanor, where, if I was current day, like a hothead or hot-tempered guy, and he was acting like that, maybe when I was 18 years old, I would have said, yo, we got a problem, but I'm 35 and mature and evolved and developed. I don't do that. So, my thought process on that is maybe this Panera staff of whatever we got, 15 to 20 young females and a couple managers that are also female, or a couple of male managers that just all, as a whole, don't like me for whatever their reasons, are sitting in, watching through the window, and then I have an altercation with the guy, and then they get to call the police on me. But I flipped the script. I read through the transparencies. For 3 weeks there was that vibe. I wasn't taking any chances, and I wasn't taking the bait. But I know the truth of what this guy was doing. I also know at this point, he's the same dude that brushed up against me while I'm online. Even that made no sense, because he should have been at the back of the line, and in 30 seconds, I got my back turned, and he's not only at the front of the line, but brushing up against me, almost to the point where it felt like I got punctured by something, he had something, he stuck me with something. I don't know I do know these crazy war strategies that cats be utilizing these days. I don't put anything past anybody. As bananas and crazy as the story would seem to the quote-unquote normal person, I don't rule out shit. I just take in the information and then decide at that point. So what I decided is that this needed to be documented, because if in 2 days I'm having a negative altercations that I'm trying to avoid at all costs, but I'm getting brushed into while my back is turned, I'm sitting in my car, I'm in the parking spot for 30 seconds, and this dude's mouthing off curse words, doing this and that type mannerisms, and looks like he's mouthing off curse words, acts all cool, calm, and collected in Panera there ain't no problem with Tank Lip, and then when I'm back sitting in my car again, continues the same antics for a minute and then drives off. I take note of his license plate and then cross-reference the license plate I had texted 2 days before and determine it's the same exact fucking license plate. So something's fishy here. Tank Lip's not just crazy and paranoid, and even if I am, doesn't put it past for these things to actually really happen. In fact, makes me an easier target, because people can always point, this guy's just crazy, and then there's no validity to my stories, and I'm just a walking liability or target. So I'm I gotta protect myself as much as I don't want to be the rat type or whatever. There's a conspiracy that I'm watching unfolding in front of my eyes, and I'm not ending up in a fucking hospital or jail because someone set me up or doesn't like Tank Lip, and this is some masterminded prank that they, concocted, and I would fall easily into their trap. So I'm trying to think like outside the box and with like some chess type strategies, one move ahead, and determined if I call the police with a non-emergency, cool, calm, collected, rational, just give them the facts, and then all I want is it documented that there's this individual, give him the license plate, and then if in 3 weeks from that point the same guy attacks me and there's a fist fight, and then wants to say, oh yeah, I always see this guy around town, he's crazy, check his background, I bet you he's got a background in mental illness, they look that up, and then I'm just a bias formulates, and I'm considered guilty even when I'm actually being premeditated on by, this guy or a group of people. And then it actually is some type of conspiracy, which I bet you plenty fall victim to because they're not, they don't think clearly and they're not calm at the times when they need to be calm. So I'm like, let me approach this like an adult. In school they teach you when someone's picking on you or bullying on you, and then you fight back, that two wrongs don't make a right. But if you tell the teacher, then your story can be validated, where once you throw a punch too, you're just as wrong as the guy bullying you. It's really no different than that, except I'm a 35-year-old man essentially being like emotionally bullied by a passive-aggressive Panera staff that decide they don't like me, and then people in town, it's like I'm walking through a storm of negative traffic, negative energy, and judgment, like constantly. And then constantly weathering the storm and knowing that if I react, I'm just going to get myself in trouble. So how can I react so I'm not a chump and also leave myself vulnerable, but in a way that is law-abiding? So I decide I'm going to call the police and register like a non-emergency, but just document this license plate. So the first, these cops, the first part of the video chopped this off, but as soon as he heard mental illness, I told him the story, basically what the guy did, and as soon as I told him, by the way, I also have mental illness, and my main concern is that there's a bias that will get formed against me if there's ever an altercation, and then I'll just be presumed the wrong one, the one in the wrong, or the guilty person, because of a background in mental illness, that they may be able to cross-reference or check some background of that. Maybe at a time I was Baker acted when I was younger or something. Who knows what's on police records? So that's a concern, that's a liability for me. That I can get into a problem with someone, be the good guy, but then still ultimately be the bad guy because of the biases that can get formed because of certain pieces of information that could be documented against me regarding mental illness or whatever. Maybe people in town say, I've seen this guy, Jason Lipp, he's a problem, you guys should arrest him. They automatically assume I'm wrong, so I'm letting the cop know. Please, as you're listening to my story, as silly and crazy as this seems, as much as you might even speculate I'm imagining this, don't use my mental illness against me. As soon as I say mental illness, his demeanor changes. Then he goes in his car, checks, runs the guy's license plate, and tells me nothing's coming up. So then I look even more crazy. He's like, let me go in and ask the staff if there's any video footage of this. I'm like, officer, when I called in, I said, please, one cop car, not two, because as soon as you bring two cop cars into a parking lot, it's anxiety producing for me. It makes the scene look bad. It's embarrassing. You guys come up in two cars. I said, you got like an undercover girl riding along with this guy. You got you. I don't know if when I said mental illness on the phone, automatically sent a mental health agent to evaluate me. I said, that's kind of what this feels like. And I said, Panera doesn't even know that I've called. They have no clue anything has gone on. So you're just dragging them into this. When he's like, let me just go in. So he goes in and then comes out and says, Panera is trespassing you. And I said, wow. I said, that's funny. And then proceeds to tell me why. He says, some of the females are saying you've made comments that make disturbing comments, quote unquote, this is his words, made disturbing comments that have made them feel uncomfortable, and the manager is saying that you come every day and complain about your coffee. I'm like, wow, this is what I get for 17 months of steady business, probably their best customer, and I'm getting trespassed for something that didn't even happen with me and them. They are trespassing me. I said, a citizen in trouble, calling for help, not even, I never even said it was an emergency, just wanted to document something. I said, that's within the law. I was not a crazy guy, panicking and, jumping to conclusions. Just want to be calm and rational about this. And I said, I'm getting trespassed. I says, isn't that an irony about society? I said, I just feel like you guys flipped the script on me because I said mental illness, and now I feel like not only are you not now taking any more information from my story, you're taking information from Panera, who wasn't even involved. So you're not validating my story, and I feel like I'm being evaluated and maybe one step away from getting Baker acted, because I don't know who this female is riding along with this officer. And they're saying, well, it's out of our hands. If Panera wants to trespass you, that's within their rights as a business, and just don't come back for a year and everything will be fine. If you come back, you can be subject to being arrested. I'm like, you know what, let me just get out of here. Are we done? Do I need to sign anything? They say no. And I'm like, what? And I said, by the way, I'll look into a lawsuit. I feel like this is discrimination against a person with mental illness from both the Oviedo police and also Panera. I said, because I've been a good customer and never had a problem. I said, I have suspected that there's a bad vibe for whatever reasons between me and the staff. But I said, I'm actually, if anything, a very nice guy. I said, I actually go out of my way, instinctively knowing people look at me like I'm weird, I go out of my way to be extra friendly. So if anything, they took my kindness and distorted it into something else because they're immature. And they're like, well, that may be so, but this is it. By the way, I find out later, it wasn't Panera that wanted to trespass me. The Oviedo police officer lied to me. He put it on Panera as though it was their decision, which it was. After the officer guided them, I think you should just trespass this guy. That's what the Oviedo officer said to them. So he did have a bias against me for mental illness, or maybe he knows me from other people in town complaining about Jason Lipp and sees me as a problem or a potential problem and automatically had no integrity, anything I was saying, gave me no validity to my story, actually had the audacity. I'm calling in for help for an alleged attack or an alleged potential attack. I'm trying to foil any problems, and goes in and suggests to Panera that they should trespass me because the manager did mention, you drag the Panera manager into it, so he's going to say something about me. I'm there for 17 months straight, day after day, and yes, I have returned coffee when they mess up. 90% of the time, I don't return my coffee, as if that is even any basis or credential to trespass somebody. And by the way, I can't stand returning coffee. Just as a side note, I don't like complaining at restaurants. The fact of the matter is, if there's 1,000 transactions and 990 times I don't complain and 10 times I return coffee because it was given to me cold, yeah, those 10 times are going to stick out. I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb as though I complain a lot. But the reality is 90% of the time, or 95 or 99% of the time, I didn't complain. So that's just bogus bullshit. And I said, I'm not surprised that girls are complaining. I said, because they throw me a bad vibe as though I'm some creep or freak, or a creeper. I said, so I'm not surprised these rumors are going around that I'm saying things. But I said, there's no validity to that. So the story continues. I call Morgan & Morgan. I call this lawsuit place. During that process, I go to the Oviedo Police Department. I talk to the police chief. And I'm like, this was a bogus trespass. And so we look into it, this and that. We call Panera's corporate headquarters and talk to human resources. Well, 2 days later, the human resources at corporate had this Panera Bread branch lift the trespassing. Even they thought what I thought, that it was the most ridiculous trespass. It wasn't warranted. It was a bias and discrimination against me that an immature staff made, and the manager should never have gone along with it. And 3 days later, after the trespass was implemented, it was also lifted just as quick. And I have been currently going back into Panera. And by the way, you think they've learned their lesson? No, the girls are still rolling their eyes at me, treating me like I'm the plague. Okay, I was actually instructed by the Panera manager that told me the trespass has been lifted. You know what his remedy was? Maybe just don't engage them or talk to them. And on one hand, I'm thinking that's great advice because I know how they see me. The staff, I know they don't like me, so why give them any chance to make more rumors? So like, I get that. But what kind of lesson are you fostering? To like encourage a staff to not, a hospitality industry, encourage them to not talk and treat me like a regular customer the same way they treat any other customer. The whole thing is so fucked up. And I've been vexed about this for a month and a half. But you know what? Justice was served in the sense that, you know what? You want to give Tank Lip a bogus trespass? Fuck you. I came